For this screencast, we're going to be looking at battles to the end for World War II. So the first thing we want to do for the do now is create a 4-line poem. How did World War II change the U.S. domestically? That is a reference to last class, because today we're pretty much going to be getting into battles. For homework, you may have received one or two different map sheets to complete. That's looking at the directions here, which was addressed in a direction screencast. So for the most part, you are being asked to position your military troops using M1 through M6. And you're playing the role of Germany. You would position them wherever, and then somebody would play the role of the Allied powers to figure out how they would go about their invasion of Nazi Germany and the Italian side. A couple things we want to note for the European invasion is geography. You want to be able to know Normandy as a definition. And you have some operations here, some battles, Operation Torch, Battle of the Bulge, Battle of the Berlin. So for the most part, this is just going to be geography using these series of maps that are here. So first item up is to look at this particular image. We can see North Africa, and we can see the bottom portion of Europe. Over here, keep in mind Germany controls a significant amount. It's very different from fighting in Asia. Keep in mind in Asia, it's the United States war. They're the ones fighting. Russia is not engaged in this particular war. However, in the war in Europe, Russia, the Soviet Union, is involved in this particular conflict. So you want to take note of the Axis and the Allied sides. You should already know that. And we've already gone over the term Vichy France. So there's two differences with regard to the fight in the two fronts. As I mentioned before, Russia's not fighting. You have different geography. You have a lot more water to contend with in the Pacific. In the fight with Japan, the climates are going to be different, and you definitely are going to need naval forces. This particular image is just looking at the amount of vessels that Japan has in comparison to the United States. So you could see in certain items like destroyers that the United States definitely seems to have a lot more ships. Part of the way to win this particular conflict is to be able to outproduce your enemy. So for the most part, what you want to do is each slide has a operation or battle, and you want to be able to know the significance. For the European front, we want to look at Operation Overlord, which seems to be the overall strategy, and it is a combination of a series of things that have to go correct and a series of battles that have to be successful. So the first one we're looking at here is Operation Torch. And when we're looking at Operation Torch, we want to take note that Operation Torch is in Africa. And the key here is that if they can successfully control this area, then maybe they can continue this invasion of Europe through the south. So that's what you want to focus for Operation Torch. You want to jot down that it's Africa and that it's potentially a staging ground. So the D-Day invasion is to figure out a way to get onto land. So for this particular part, you want to think of this. You have land, the land ends, here's some water. Let's think about if you're at the beach. If you're at the Jersey Shore, maybe you have a boardwalk here, and maybe you have you want to get a slice of pizza at the pizza shop. I'm just doing this to give you an idea of distance. So the key is that you can't just have your ships come all the way up. The ships would just get stuck. So the plan is you have to drop soldiers into the water, and the soldiers have to get across the beach, and they have to get onto the boardwalk to get a slice of pizza. But the difference is that there are people positioned here who are shooting at you. So in this particular image here, you see the soldiers getting out of the vessel, and we need to get these soldiers onto land. That seems to be the goal. So the D-Day invasion, where is this taking place? Well, this is taking place, which is why this particular map comes into play. We want to look at right here, this particular arrow. Keep in mind, Operation Torch is over here. So they want to be able to attack in this direction, but they also want to be able to attack in this direction. So they want to be able to come in two different sides there. So that seems to be the goal. Just trying to give you an idea of the Normandy invasion, why that would be significant. So at this point, we would have watched the opening scene of the movie Saving Private Ryan, and we'd be asked to write a poem pretending you are a soldier who has to pretty much go about that particular battle. So when we look at the Normandy invasion, we have a couple of additional goals here that are outlined: free France, land troops, and Russia on the other side is probably saying, save us. You know, if we're looking at a map of Europe and, you know, the Allies are coming in this direction, the Russians over here, and they're ultimately going to complain that there seems to be a lot more Russian death on the Western Front. East would be over here, West would be over here. So the Allies are going to embark on this invasion of Normandy, which is going to allow them to start bringing materials into France, which is what this image here is showing you. So this image is after the Normandy invasion, and what you see here is now troops are allowed to be deployed. So if we go back to my image with the beach and water, you can now, once you successfully control the beachhead, start dropping in materials, whatever tanks, ammunition, food, uniforms, and all types of items. That's what the significance of this particular image here is trying to show you. You see all of the battleships out here, and they're trying to just bring materials. So I've already gone over two. We have the Normandy invasion. We also have Operation Torch. Keep in mind, D-Day, Normandy invasion, we will be talking about the same thing. Battle of the Bulge. The significance of this particular battle is it's the last German offensive. That's key. Last German offensive. So when we're looking at this very complicated map, we just see a bunch of red arrows that are going in this direction. So if we're looking, here we see Belgium, here we see Germany. So if we look at like this, we're going to have the German side, or we're going to have the Allied side here. It's the last time that the Germans are going in this direction, attacking. From this point forward, after the Allies are successful at the Battle of the Bulge, you're going to see the last time the Germans attack, and for the most part, they're going to spend the duration of the war from this point forward going back into Germany. In other words, they are retreating. That's what makes this a significant battle here. The squeeze, we've already addressed this before. So pretty much what we have is that the Allies want to be able to attack Germany from three different directions, but it is dependent on a couple of things happening. You have to be successful at Normandy, you have to be successful in Africa with Torch, and you also have to hope that the Soviet Union is able to attack from this particular direction. And then you would pretty much wind up squeezing Germany by attacking in three different directions. Another thing you want to take note of in this particular map here is Stalingrad. Stalingrad is the furthest into the west, into the Soviet Union that Germany is able to get. And from that point, the Russians are successful. And again, the Germans are starting to retreat back. So that's kind of what the significance of these battles seem to be. They are trying to squeeze Germany, and it depends on all of these particular, battles going successful. This slide here just comes from a book called Backing Hitler. And if you were wondering about some of those concentration camps, let's see. Let's take this date, January 1945. There seems to be 511,000 people in a concentration camp. And here we're talking about Auschwitz, and they're going to make the decision to evacuate Auschwitz. And that's what leads to what's known as the death marches. Here you see Jewish survivors that are being marched back to Germany after the liquidation order is given. The Battle of Berlin is another battle. This is the battle where Germany is pretty much, let's take here, here we have France. Let's put Russia over here. So we know that we're successful attacking in this direction from Africa, Normandy, and the Russians are here. So this is Germany's last attempt to defend its capital. Notice the Soviet Union is putting their flag in the capital of Berlin. Hitler is going to commit suicide, signifying that Germany is out of the conflict. I also want to point out that Italy was already out of the conflict at this particular point. Let's take a look at the fight in Asia. So in Asia, you want to take note of unconditional surrender, which was already addressed. We want to take note of the geography, the differences with regard to the ocean and the need for a naval force. So pretty much like the other European front on the prior slides, we're going to be looking at some of the slides. And this one, I give you the battle and I give you the significance. So here we have the first item up, which is the Battle of Coral Sea. Japan is attempting to capture a port and establish an air base serving Australia from the Allies, severing Australia from the Allies. So we want to take note of this one here. We're primarily looking at Australia. They're trying to control this particular area right there, and it involves an air base. So that right there is key. Japanese advance is halted. We also see some casualties. Notice the casualties do not seem to be too high. I'll come back to this one. Midway. So the significance of the Midway battle here is that this is supposed to be an attack by Japan, and apparently U.S. code breakers are able to determine that this attack is going to take place. So the U.S. forces are pretty much waiting. And it's weird because it's supposedly Japanese sneak attack, surprise attack, but because the Americans are aware of it, they wind up sneak attacking the sneak attackers, if that makes any particular sense. But that's kind of the way I want you to think about this. I think the Japanese are going to attack us here, so the Americans are able to devote their resources into this particular area, and they are able to catch Japan off guard. Let's see, the Midway battle. So again, the Midway battle with that surprise attack, but it's also a significance because we're midway point between the United States and Asia, so it would be able to play the role of as a midway base. So here we go, Midway battle, some specifics. Japanese code breakers, they want to break in the code. Japan's navy is reduced. Take a look at the casualties. More casualties on the Japanese side in comparison to the U.S. And the Midway battle is the one dealing with an ambush. So when we're looking at the Coral Sea battle, we want to focus on Australia and the air base. Australia being down here. Midway, we want to focus on the midpoint and the surprise attack that takes place. Guadalcanal. So this one here, the outcome is that Japan is going to be on the run. So very similar to like the Battle of the Bulge. From this particular point, Japan is less likely to attack, and they are going to be going into a defensive mode. So here we see a couple of items. We see Australia down here, Coral Sea, Guadalcanal. And again, you know, the overall strategy here with regard to geography is to take one island at a time. So, you know, when you're at the midway, when we're looking at Coral Sea, Guadalcanal, you have to be able to obtain these areas, these small islands, and kind of go one at a time. So Guadalcanal, with this one, we have a ground war that begins, and again, they're trying to control supply lines, fighting along near Australia. And we see that air base being captured in this particular one. I just did a search for Japanese people running. This apparently is what shows up. And, you know, again, I'm just trying to get you to think about that. Japan is less likely to attack, and at this particular point, they seem to be on the run. So you want to focus on the significance of these slides. If you didn't notice that, there's always a significance section that I've incorporated here. Japanese advance halted. Let's see, Iwo Jima. So at the Iwo Jima battle, the key here is that we're getting closer to Japan, and at some point there's going to have to be a decision that is going to be made. So let's take a look at this section here, this particular map, and we see some of the significant places where battles, you know, have taken place. And what I want you to think about here is if you're going, you know, one island at a time, ultimately, you're going to have to realize that attacking Japan is going to be a little more complicated just because of the sheer size of this particular area. Similar to Normandy, when you have to land forces on the beach, the same thing is going to happen with regard to Japan. So you want to be thinking about that same particular scenario. Iwo Jima, see, we have some high U.S. casualties here, and this is very telling of what eventually is going to happen. When you get to Iwo Jima, you need to now make a decision. Are you going to go ahead with an invasion of Japan, or are you going to do something drastic? And that's where the ultimate island hopping campaign comes in. So for Japan, and I didn't focus too much on all of the battles, but the overall strategy here is you want to go one island at a time, and then when you get to Japan, you need to make a decision. What are you going to do? What is crucial to engage Japan in a ground war, naval battle, or bombing? How are you going to attack this particular area? it is going to be complicated. Keep in mind, the Japanese are following their Emperor Hirohito as God in human form. He is a deity, and that means you might possibly have to engage Japanese civilians. The Okinawa battle, U.S. wins, kamikaze tactics, and civilians start to engage U.S. soldiers, which is going to put U.S. soldiers in a predicament here. You're dealing with kamikaze tactics, which pretty much means let's just get in the plane and let's just attack the target. And now we're starting to see the use of civilians. Also, keep in mind the U.S. casualties are starting to increase at this particular point. And that's ultimately where the decision to use the nuclear bomb is going to come in. Here I did a search for Roosevelt's letter, where he writes, Einstein writes to Roosevelt talking about the possibility of making a nuclear bomb, which is going to lead to the development of the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was a government program designed to develop a nuclear bomb led by Robert Oppenheimer. So I keep bringing up the question, how do you attack Japan? If you're going to attack Japan, what are you going to do? Do you just bomb this area? Let's say we position naval forces here and we just start bombing this country and hopefully kill people, which at that point we could then deploy troops. Or do you just say, forget the bombing, let's just deploy troops and go about this invasion of Japan? Either way, you have to be willing to accept some casualties. Eventually, Operation Downfall, which was supposed to be the plan designed to attack Japan, here's an image of what that's going to look like. The decision is ultimately made to just drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That seems to be how this war is going to come to an end. Here we see Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where 2 atomic bombs are dropped on those 2 places. So a few more things with regard to the end of this conflict. What do you do with the concentration camps as the Allied forces are taking over territory of Germany? They're encountering numerous amounts of civilian casualties. Hiroshima, is this a war crime against humanity? Keep in mind, we're trying to get an unconditional surrender. And what about our alliance with Russia? Russia always feeling during the conflict that, number one, we did not consult them with the Manhattan Project. We did not help on the Western Front. We cared more about freeing France. And you start to see World War II leading to tension between the United States and Russia, which will set us up for the Cold War. Because just like World War I led to World War II, we're going to see World War II lead to the Cold War. And you can make an argument that the Cold War does link to the War on Terror, but that's something different. Anyway, Cold War is pretty much where we're going next. That's it for Battles.